Hey everybody, Riot Mort and Riot Statikk here, and we're back for the patch 1023 post-mortem. This is where we look back at the patch, see how it played out, and talk about what went right and what went wrong. So, yeah, you ready to do this?
Yep, as long as you don't yell at me.
Only a little, I promise. No,
This is really annoying.
generally so far though, it seems like we've got some issues which we'll talk about. Some things went good, some things went bad. So let's just jump into it. Systems. We made improvements to the champion movement logic. This should result in a more consistent expected behavior, most notably at the start of the fights. So I think I'm glad we did this. It's one of those things that it's not noticeable what we did. Because when things are working right, you don't notice it, and when things aren't working, you're just not noticing the things not happening. It has made movement kind of look jankier, and so hopefully in the future we can make it look a little better, especially with melee champions in particular. But overall, I think this was an improvement to the game that was needed. So cool. Okay, cultists. Generally, we threw out some cultist buffs. We nerfed cultist 6 actually. We let Galio cast his spell a little quicker, and then we gave Galio 9 the QS. How you feeling about these?
I mean, I think it was all in positive direction, trying to actually make Galio just a more consistent, effect for the cultist composition. And I think in the meta that we're currently in right now, it feels pretty reasonable. But you know, the spike at 6 is still a little scary, and can be extremely dominant. But I think right now because the roll downs are happening, at the level 7, it's making it not as crazy as it would be in a different meta. So we're gonna have to see. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, it's funny when people talk about balance. A lot of players perceive it as there's this one lever, right? And it's like buff, nerf, and you slide this lever. And I think Cultist in particular shows that that is not what balance is. Balance is like you've got 38 different levers, and any various combination of those levers is what you need. So it's like this one has to be higher, but this one has to be lower. And I think a lot of the things that were done here were correct. I think, letting Galio cast a spell sooner was good. I think 9 cultists getting QSS was good. I think preemptively nerfing 9 Galio to give up for that buff was good. I think nerfing cultist was good. Despite all of this, what we've actually ended up with is cultist is a little strong. It's like if you get a cultist chosen opener, that's probably the easiest fast 9 in the game right now. So it's actually kind of surprising how strong they've turned out. And so there were probably some other levers we needed to tune, which I think you'll see in the 1024 notes. But directionally, I don't look at these and go, we did anything wrong. I think this was good changes for the long term direction of cultists. So
Yeah, I think something to bring up is the difficulty in tuning some of these more like power spike like comps or even items. It's been tough for us because they just usually just don't follow that same curve that every other thing they're being compared to is. So like cultist spikes really hard at 3 and 6 and 9, but then like it scales off really hard relative to most of the traits. An example in items would be like Sunfire Cape or Zzeroth right now are really powerful early on and then scale down really hard. So it's really tough to get it just right when they are so different in terms of when and how they're being powerful in during the game. So
yeah, I agree. I agree. Cool. Other trait changes: Dazzler 2 nerf. Seems like this was a slam dunk.
yeah, they still seem very powerful. I mean, sometimes when I say they, I mean Morgana, but I mean I think all the Dazzlers are doing pretty well for themselves.
Yeah, I've seen good 2 Dazzler. I've seen good 4 Dazzler. I think Dazzler finally feels like the trait it was always intended to be. So feels pretty good. Divine buff. This is where we buffed the true damage. We nerfed the 2-second duration, buffed the 8 duration. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, Divine is kind of a weird composition. I feel like we identified correctly during the patch cycle, this patch cycle, that the comp was extremely focused around Warwick. If you can get Warwick itemized correctly and have Divine on him, like it goes off. But it almost feels like we didn't really address the composition as a whole well enough. I don't feel like enough of the units, maybe like characters like Jax, are bringing enough to the table to make the comp as a whole feel more viable. So it's obviously not seeing a lot of play, but I still think these changes were good. But
Yeah.
what about you, more?
Yeah, I agree. I think we got a really important learning from this patch and this, which is that certain champs and certain compositions, the min-max difference between their perfect items and their like slightly less optimal items. In some comps, like Diana, if you don't have perfect items, it's probably not a big deal. It's probably not going to change much. Warwick, for example, though, if you don't have exactly Deathblade Hurricane QS, his power drops a lot. And so something we're going to, I think, have to get better at in the future is accounting for like the theoretical max of a comp, the theoretical like average and the minimum, and making sure that that range isn't just like wildly out of control. And we see a lot of examples of this, right? Like RFCZ versus not RFCZ, stuff like that. So Shojin sharpshooters versus not Shojin sharpshooters, and so we're just gonna have to really keep an eye on some of these and try to rein these in. And I think that was a really important learning we got from this patch. So
yeah, for sure.
Cool. Hunter nerf 25% at every level. Seems like this is just a slam dunk. Hunters are still good. People are still running Ashe. It's not like she's underpowered. The trade is still good. I've still seen success even with Aphelios in the early game. So yeah, seems like a slam dunk.
Yeah, I think Hunter in particular, something that maybe just me, vastly underestimated was the fact that it can kind of target enemy backline carries without really having to go to their backline. I think that in of itself is just so powerful that this number doesn't really need to be that high to be powerful.
Yeah.
So.
Especially when you get like 4 hunters and they're all shooting the same target, like that's a dead target.
Yeah, it's dead.
So, Fortune, we added the 10, 11, and 12 loss streak. So credit to Giovanni as he's the one who was like, I really want to make sure we get 10, 11, and 12 in. And yeah, I made the tables, whatever. But like, this has been fun. Players are having fun with this, and I think we're seeing more dramatic comebacks. We're seeing exciting moments. I think this was just... I'm glad we did this.
It's funny because it's probably even more fun than you think it is, because the people who are loss streaking and make that crazy Fortune turnaround are having an awesome time, but then the people that are just beating them up are probably also having a fun time.
Yeah.
At least during the meantime until they get all their stuff and then you lose. But,
yeah. It's crazy, but I wildly consider Fortune like the biggest success we've had this set. I think it is just the most fun trait to play, and I'm a little biased because I enjoy it, but it creates such a cool way to play the game.
Yeah, super cool.
Cool. Keeper, shield duration went from 8 seconds to 8, 10, 14, and Keeper is finally a playable comp, and we're finally seeing 6 Keeper be real, and the praises were sung, hallelujah. What do you think?
I mean, I've been through like a lot trying to get Keeper to feel more like a comp or like an actual trait that you would want to keep past like stage 3, and I'm glad this end solution was just kind of like changing the duration. It was just something that we're a little bit nervous sometimes with messing around with durations of things, because it kind of, your instincts for how long this thing's going to last or how long the effect's going to stick around is going to change all the time. That can lead to some like poor intuitions while playing the game. But I think in this case it was like the simple lever that ended up having a good effect on this composition, and I'm glad that people are actually hopefully just using it instead of feeling like a chosen keepers are just kind of worthless.
I think for a long time we were all paranoid about it being too similar to Brawler, right? Where this is just giving them flat health for a long time. I think it still doesn't feel like Brawler, and so I'm kind of glad we eased up on that fear and just leaned into this. So yeah, this seems like a solid slam dunk, and Keeper actually feels really strong, maybe even a tiny too strong across the board. So good. It feels good to finally be there. So
yeah,
cool. All right, champions. This is where we did the Aphelios rework, where his mana got changed drastically, attack speed went up, but no longer turrets generating mana and on hits. I'll comment on this one first. I think directionally this was correct. I think long term this is going to be healthy for the game. But this will continue to be a really good example, and I'll probably keep using the Aphelios example for the next 3 sets of development as, bad versus, a lot of things went wrong with Aphelios' development. And now what we've done is we've taken him and we've flattened him. So he's a healthier champion, probably a little underpowered right now, but that's easy. We can just buff him, which I think we're doing next patch. But he's flatter, right? You're not hitting those highs that you were hitting before. And so I think this change was necessary, but I wish we weren't in the situation where we had to make this change.
Yeah, I mean, just to give some context for those who are interested, like when we first put Aphelios into the game and prototyped him, we were playing him. We liked the idea of him, and I just remember so many playtests when we would like put all these interesting items on him, like Rageblade or Bloodthirster, and like at first his turrets basically didn't inherit anything; they were just kind of doing attacks on the side. And so at some point, Whitrock basically went in and made the change so that it would kind of like mimic his basic attack with the turrets, and all of a sudden he became like this really cool combinatoric champion. And we've had to like pull back so much from that point because we've kind of figured out all the abuse cases and what led to his like again his high ceiling being too high and then his floor being too low. So we're trying to get back to a middle ground here, but yeah, it's going to be tough during like a mid set to figure out if there's some other mechanics we needed to have had to get him into the right spot or not.
Yeah. Like I said, lots to learn for champion development. I think Aphelios will be a good case to look back on. So, all right, Zed 1 and 2 buffs. I think these were fine. It's interesting because I think we'll talk about this in the patch rundown. But like Zed is a case where player perception is he's very strong, data perception is he's weak, borderline garbage.
Yeah.
But we are seeing some success cases, like the winner of the TL qualifier was basically a Z1 trick. So, pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's the tough part about trying to balance TFT, honestly. Like we like the data and what we get, the feedback we get from both high and high level players and just like average players is sometimes wildly different, and even like you see even the results in like a tournament is even different there. So me personally putting this in, I was pretty confident we could buff 1 and 2 star Zed, just because he's extremely reliant on getting to being used as a chosen right now, and literally you never see 1 star Zed if you're playing chosen, and these numbers felt really low. I also think a lot of his power historically in the set has come from actually early shade, and that's been nerfed a lot. So
yep,
yeah, it's been interesting. I'm glad this didn't like make him crazy broken, but as you said, like he's clearly a good strategy in some form.
Yeah, this felt like a low risk change, so I'm glad we made it. Akali attack speed buff. Again, seems like it's been a fine change. Akali's a little bit better, not taking over the meta. Seems fine to me.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think this is one where I personally felt like we undershot the mana change we made to her to reduce the repeatability of her spell so that she was less reliant on blue buff was great, but it actually ended up nerfing her power level a lot, more than I expected. And this attack speed buff surprisingly didn't do a whole ton. Probably because our optimal builds are still surrounding, spell power and more of like the RFC stuff, and not exactly like going around and hitting people with their auto attack as much.
I'll push back a little because I have started to see people actually not build blue buff Akali. Like they go RFC, IE, death cap, and like it's actually kind of threatening. So I don't know. I still think this has been a positive change.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just feel like we could have done more, and I think in the next patch you guys will see that we did a little bit more, because looking at her data, it was quite weak still, especially for a ninja at 3 costs. So
makes sense. Cool. Katarina 1 star buff seems pretty safe. I think if anything, this turned out to be like a fortune buff.
Is it though? You're not losing more. Think about that.
Ooh,
big brain.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of mixed reviews in terms of just like, a lot of people saw this and they're like, a lot of Katarina players are like, I think she's already strong, and maybe sometimes it was like her weakness is actually that she just dies too fast in those early cycles, which is fair. But I think we wanted to keep her identity as kind of like that squishy assassin who, if she gets her spell off, it just rips your back line.
See, I think that's the important thing, is keeping Katarina's identity. Like when people are like, oh, it takes too long to cast, it's like, yeah, that's her identity, is she takes a long time to cast, but when she does, team go boom. So I think we really have to maintain that.
I think like as Warlord becomes comes into more of its own, like she's obviously going to get even stronger, and not necessarily just because she's getting stronger, but her comp is getting stronger. So
Yep.
I think there's a lot more in store for her in the future in terms of how much Katarina will be effective in the future of the set.
Yeah. Callista 3 buff. I think this is fine. I think the real issue is going to continue to be that Callista has weird calculation issues with various shields and various divines and things like that. But ignoring that problem, this seemed like a solid buff, and 3-star Callista seems a little bit better. So
Yeah, fine change. I think it was we just wanted to give cultists just another way to like get stretch their power into the late game. That wasn't just like stuff it all inside of Galio because there's a lot in there already. But yeah, I do think I agree. I've been inside her AI, and this is like a difficulty in general with trying to make like smart AI on these characters. Like Callista has to try to take into account all these different types of factors that could be going on in a combat as to when she should pull out her stacks, and it's really complicated. I've been in that code, and I'm like, it's just
the Kennen armor and MR buff, as well as the Kennen 3 nerf. I think this is another slam dunk. I think this has been good for the game. Kennen feels a little bit more playable now, so this to me just seems like a solid win.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the direction we went because, especially for like comps like Ninja, right, where they basically only have Shen as a front line, like just letting Kennen be like he's kind of just like left on an island by himself in the back. He's like, letting him be a little tankier, or in in Keeper, you literally tend to just shove him in the front because he has the shield to survive, and you want his ult radius to stretch as far back into the enemy line as possible. So that kind of really helps him out with his positioning things. I did get a lot of feedback, or a decent feedback, that people didn't understand why we nerfed the 3-star because it was kind of like one of the only 3 costs people felt like it was worth pursuing. But honestly, even at 1200, it's pretty worth pursuing. I think. So
it's still real good.
Yeah, I mean that's why that's like my response there. But I did understand, like, hey, like I think there is a certain lack of 3-stars that people feel are really worth going after, and he was kind of like one of the clear ones. I've just been too clear, and I was scared with buffing the armor and MR. If we didn't do anything with that, it could just make it.
Yeah, I think if you didn't do that, this armor buff combined with the 6 keeper buff would have probably pushed it to the stratosphere. So I'm glad you did this. Cool. Xin Zhao rework. I'll let you talk about this one.
Yeah, I mean, this was a big roller coaster for us because I think even before this patch, we had been messing around with ideas on how we wanted to actually make Xin Zhao work as a carry because he's such a critical part of the Warlord composition as the intended like wearer of the attack damage items and actually carrying from that role. So yeah, I kind of made this iteration, and it had its own unique identity of kind of like Xin scaling throughout a fight and becoming unkillable and kind of just like spinning and killing everyone. It was tough throughout the process because he started at like a pretty, I would say, a balanced point inside our internal tests, and he was failing a lot, and then we ended up buffing him a ton, and then he was really OP, and we had to end up nerfing him a lot right before the release of the patch, and we just ended up just too weak, I think. It was just a guessing game for us on that, and we undershot. But in the next patch, we were pushing him up a little bit. I think he still ultimately is very limited because he's a melee character. Like, he eats a lot of CC, so if you don't have QS on him, he gets kind of wrecked. But he also needs a bunch of damage items and potentially some tank items, so it's a lot. But I definitely feel very positive about this because it made Xin Zhao like possible carry, but I think he's just not there yet now in this patch.
Yeah, I think directionally this is a win to me. I think Xin Zhao is a more fun champion than he was before. I think that part, slam dunk to the team. Good job. I think, like you said, he's a little underpowered right now. We can buff that. He's a little limited because he'll be a three cost melee. He's never going to be a major star. I do think we're also still seeing players really struggle to find that proper item build. Is it defensive? Is it offensive? Is it QS? Is it IE? Is it Bloodthirster? Is it Hodge? I think people are still struggling to figure that out. And he kind of reminds me of Warwick, where I think once people figure out what that build is, he might take off. Maybe not, but yeah, I've played a bunch of them, and like the difference between like good items and mediocre items is pretty different here. So
Yeah. I also think like another scary thing about him is sometimes the difference I think between his 3-star and his other stars is quite
Yeah,
large. Just
yeah,
being able to have that huge HP pool to build up his armor and MR
yep.
on, and then all the AD multiplication he's doing, I think it's gonna be a little bit tough going to the
Yeah, he
future,
reminds me of
making
Katarina
sure
in
his
that
1 and
regard.
2 stars are good.
He reminds
Mhm.
me of Katarina, where it's like the 2-star Katarina is like okay, but 3-star Katarina has so much HP that she guaranteed casts, and that cast is so strong. So 3-star Katarina is amazing. So yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Warlord reroll or bust, man.
Yeah. All right. 4 cost is where we did a lot of the work last patch. Ari, slight buff, but we also did the bomb thing with the GA. Honestly, this seemed like it has worked out. I'm still seeing Ari comps do well, but they're also not oppressive. Part of that is Talon, which we'll talk about later. But so far, this actually, crazily enough, seems like a win.
Yeah, I mean, this is also something that came from an idea from Giovanni and Whitrock, who are like some of the of our big minds on designing the new sets. They just had this idea, and I just wanted to bring it to life because I thought it had a lot of interesting counterplay potential. I like it overall, but I do worry that we may just end up in a spot where she feels too unreliable now, and maybe we need to pull some other levers like her mana or something that makes more sense. I know I watched a lot of streams and a lot of the high level players are not excited to run her, but like you said, that might be a more like a Talon meta. Like she's just so vulnerable to that.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger thing is like Talon kind of steamrolls her right now. But when there aren't a lot of Talons, she actually does very well. So I'm not that worried about Ari. I think long term she's in a decent spot. So if anything, she might even be too good long term, but we'll see.
Ooh, spicy take.
Yeah. All right, Ash nerf, HP and armor. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean that's fine to do. I think it didn't make sense why she had this excess defensive capabilities when she already has Elderwood as such a powerful defensive, like secondary defensive trait. But it also probably didn't really move the needle much, honestly, in my opinion. It's just she's hard to kill because she has good front line, and unless you get to her really fast in a fight, which is tough because of the way her comps can generally position,
Yeah.
you're not going to kill her.
I
Not
I think
easily,
this was the correct approach though, and I'm really happy with how you approached this patch with Ash, because it was like we had the Hunter nerf and we had the Ash health nerf. You didn't go overkill. You didn't remove Ash from the meta. People are still playing Ash. She's not oppressive. This felt like another case of like, let's take it easy, let's take it slow, and I think even if she is still a little strong, this is much healthier than also nerfing her spell and ending up with a world where there are no ashes. So I was really happy with the approach here.
Yeah, and I think there's some this is just like a personally me kind of speaking out loud. Sometimes I worry that like players are getting sick of a character, because Ash has been really relevant pretty much since like the release of the
Yep.
set. Kind of going out a little bit, but basically during PBE she was like kind of weak, and then we buffed her, and she was kind of like since that point she's been really strong. And
Yep.
sometimes I just want to have that thing in the back of my head where it's like, oh, is Ash just annoying at this point because she's just been winning so many rounds against so many people.
Yeah. I think we got to fight that though. Let the Ash
Yeah,
players
yeah,
have their fun. So.
that's true.
All right. Sejuani. I think this one is like was so good. It's like a preview of what's to come because you're going to see in 1024 there's a lot of similar changes to this one. I think this was correct, which is like Sejuani still gets to have a powerful cast, but way less AoE repeat CC. So this just to me is a slam dunk. I'm glad we made this change.
Yeah, we've been kind of navigating, and I think a lot of our players could agree that we're navigating this kind of really high CC world of set 4 of fates, and like IQS has been so important to this current set. And part of it we think is actually more of the repeatability of these spells, less that Sejuani has a big stun, like that's meant to be at 4 cost her big output, but it's more of when you itemize her and she's getting like 3-4 casts off, just seems kind of silly and feels pretty frustrating to play against. So
Yep.
yeah, look forward to more of changes like this in the future.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the spicy ones. You ready? You ready for the spicy ones?
No.
Let's talk about Talon. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goals were correct on what we were trying to do with Talon, which was I know we were trying to open up more windows of vulnerability on him and be like, okay, can we make him not just get onto the enemy carry ASAP and destroy them? But the change list we ended up putting in, and honestly, I'll take credit for it. I put it in basically, ended up just making him in some ways harder to deal with. Um, he was guaranteed to not land on the tank pretty much because he's going for lowest armor. So in the cases where you're using like Riven as a primary damage dealer, he was cleaning up the whole enemy team and then getting to Riven, and that was enough for his team to win the fight. This is stuff that Mort totally told me about, and I pretty much didn't listen to. But the second change, which was increase the leap time, I the main two reasons for this was, one, I think his leap was too fast before, and it was making fights hard to read when he was killing things.
Yeah.
But the second the second part of this was just to give players more time to, like, if he's mowing through my team, hopefully my Ashe can kind of keep up with him. It was the theory. But I didn't really take well into account the part that he was actually like invulnerable and untargetable, and it actually ended up making a lot of spells that should hit him not hit him anymore because he's just in the air flipping around and not taking any damage. So yeah, I mean, there's a pretty big whiff here. We really wanted to hit him a lot harder and make him more fun to play against, and he really just was the opposite of that this patch.
Yeah, so I'm going to dive in a little bit, because like you talked about, the whole highest damage dealt into armor thing, you and I disagreed on this one. We shipped it. Yeah. Oops, shit happens. Live and learn. The increased leap time one, though, that was one I actually was on your side. I very much thought that, like, hey, if Talon's going to kill 7 targets, increasing the time it takes for him to kill those 7 targets gives your team more time to do stuff. Like, I was confident this was going to be a nerf. What I didn't count on was just the feeling of frustration. Like, even if it actually is a nerf, and it still might actually be a nerf, but the feeling of, like, he dodged the spell feels so bad to play against that escalated the feeling of frustration on Talon in ways even I didn't expect. This is like, wow, I did not realize how frustrating it is to see your spell completely whiff just because he happens to be jumping, and he's jumping so long now. So that's one I think we all just kind of really missed on, and so I don't think you hold all the blame on that one. That's a hard one, and that's a good lesson to learn here. And looking back, I thought I should have thought about it. Like, anytime it's happened with Shade, or anytime like a Nidalee spear misses, it sucks. It feels bad. You want your spells to do their job. Right. So I think it's just a key lesson for us to take moving forward. Yeah. Cool. All right, enough about Talon. Let's talk about Warwick. Warwick's the other spicy one. Now, I'll talk about Warwick a little bit, and then you can talk about the hunter bug part. Warwick, if you looked at our sims, was dominating. Like, we were pretty sure the 6 Divine comp was going to be the best comp in 1024. Like, it wasn't even close, to be honest. So we preemptively nerfed Warwick to make sure that it wasn't quite as dominating. He went from, like, ridiculous win rate to, like, really good win rate in our sims. But as I touched on earlier, this is another case where the best case is so much worse than the low case. We had perfect items on our Warwick in the sims, and he was really good. After this patch, we actually put another version of the Warwick in the sims. The only thing we changed was Deathblade into IE, and his win rate went like into a middle average comp. And so again, the big learning for us here is, like, we have to be careful, because, like, if the best case is just far and away the best case, well, that's not going to be fun either. But if 90% of the time it's a bad comp, except for when you get these exact items, that's not good either. And so we've got some work to do to make sure that, again, that gap closes. So
yeah, I mean, I think overall, though, we were right to address Warwick, given that we were buffing Divine. But it just felt like we may have, for one, overswung, or just not really understood what his realistic power level was going to be like. People are still seeing fringe viability of him, and they don't consider him trash, but hopefully next patch is better for him. On the bug side, oh man, this bug actually got reported to us through a players onto Discord, and I fixed it, and then I don't know what happened, but I just didn't submit it somehow. I literally looked at the file history and I was like, where is it? And I don't know. I don't know. It's fine. This one, it's fixed next patch for sure. Though,
Yep,
so.
we'll get it in. No big deal. All right, Lilia buff. I think this is just a slam dunk. It's interesting. Player perception of Lilia is still pretty bad, but I think top level players are finally realizing that Lilia is actually like insane, like ridiculously insane. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think CC spells. It's really like breakpoint-y. Is that a word? Breakpoint-y?
Yeah.
Pointy. Like if you can get your spell off before they do, it's possible that they will never cast their spell that entire fight. Especially with Lilia, with how long her CC duration is. So I feel like a little bit goes a long way on her. And again, I know we probably said this a million times on these different videos. Is I think ultimately part of her low appreciability is like just the visuals, and also like she isn't as like flashy as some of these other characters, as well as she's tied to mage, which I think is actually limited at her like flexibility at the 5-cost tier that we've been shooting for in the previous couple expansions and sets.
So speaking of flashy, so that you can have some more good credit here, Lee Sin 3-star. What do you think?
I mean, we turned him into the One Punch Man. I don't know if anyone's actually done this. I'm sure there's videos. I hope they had fun with it.
I can tell you player response has been really positive. So
okay, awesome. Yeah, it's one of those things where like you feel weird about putting it in as a designer because you're like, this can't be right. Like this just seems so silly. But when we get to 3-star 5-cost, it's like all bets are out the window. Just forget about balance and just go for something cool. And it reminds me of like Thresh pulling in the whole bench type of thing. It's just funny.
Yep. No, to be honest, I think we need more of this. Like, I think 3-star Yone needs some love. I think some more of these champions need some love. So I'm happy to see this, and I want to see more of it. So, and then Kayn fixed his AI again, slam dunk. Kayn's usable again. Seems good.
So. Might be really good. We'll have to see. It's definitely a character we're keeping our eye on. He tends to be a character that's really, really strong, or up to not so good. So.
And then the last thing is we weren't planning on B patching, but we had a bug where Talon wouldn't stop hitting himself, and so in the time we were like, well, we're fixing the bug. We may as well also do a small nerf to Talon. So what are your thoughts there?
I mean, I feel bad about the bug. It was very confusing, and I don't know why he does that to himself, but I made him not do that to himself. But on the damage tuning, it's tough because I see, after seeing him on live and how the lowest armor stuff played out, like I saw what we needed to do actually, but in these hot fixes, micro patches, we're kind of limited in what we can do realistically. So kind of took a really safe approach, and honestly it didn't really change much, and I think most players knew that it wasn't going to change very much and that he would still be very strong and kind of one of the main characters you're looking for on that 4-1 run roll down. But we tried to do something which I think is good, but hopefully you guys see what we'll do with him in the next patch that'll hopefully make this a lot better.
I think Talon's actually, it's not as bad as Warwick, but I think it's another example too where the min-max gets pretty silly. Like a 2-star Talon with a Hodge and a Bloodthirster, not that scary and probably not that strong at all. A Chosen Talon with an Infinity Edge and a GA and a Bloodthirster or a Deathblade on the other hand, whee! Yeah. So again, just that min-max stuff we've got to take a close look at. So, cool. All right, that is the patch retro for 1023. So yeah, as always, if you enjoy these, thanks for watching. If you don't, I'm sorry. So. Until that's it. Until next time, take it easy.